we're about to start. It's so wonderful to have you all here to learn a little bit more about environmental justice. My name is Jesuit, and I've had the privilege of being a sustainability intern with Bellarmine Chapel this year. Part of this role, I've had the opportunity to be a part of the planning team for the Embracing God's Creation series, which is a collaborative effort for the Cincinnati Jesuit works, including Bellarmine Chapel, St. Xavier Church, Xavier University, St. Xavier High School, the Jesuit Spiritual Center at Milford, and the newly formed Xavier Jesuit Academy. Wrapping up our third year, the Embracing God's Creation series is rooted in two key inspirations: Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home, and the Society of Jesus' 2019 Universal Apostolic Preference number 4, caring for our common home. I'm now going to kind of talk about how our event will unfold. We will begin in a moment with a prayer. Next, Jesse will guide us through an educational presentation on environmental justice and what action and advocacy look like in Cincinnati. Then we'll have a brief time for reflection, where you can discuss your initial thoughts with those around you or on your own using the handouts that we had in the back. And you can go grab those after the presentation if you need one. And then finally, Jesse will return for a 10 to 15 minute Q&A to address any of the questions that you may still have afterwards. So now, before I introduce tonight's speaker, let us begin with a prayer from Pope Francis's Prayer for Our Earth. Please take a moment to center yourselves as we pray. All-powerful God, you are present in the whole universe and in the smallest of your creatures. You embrace with your tenderness all that exists. Pour out upon us the power of your love, that we may protect life and beauty. Fill us with peace, that we may live as brothers and sisters, harming no one. O God of the poor, help us to rescue the abandoned and forgotten of this earth, so precious in your eyes. Bring healing to our lives, that we may protect the world and not prey on it, that we may sow beauty, not pollution and destruction. Touch the hearts of those who look only for gain at the expense of the poor and the earth. Teach us to discover the worth of each thing, to be filled with awe and contemplation, to recognize that we are profoundly united with every creature as we journey towards your infinite light. We thank you for being with us each day. Encourage us, we pray, in our struggle for justice, love, and peace. Amen. With that, I'm honored to now introduce Jesse Velazquez. As the Climate Justice Manager on the Energy Team at the Ohio Environmental Council, Jesse works to advance equitable clean energy policies that protect Ohio's communities from pollution while promoting a just transition to a sustainable future. Through policy advocacy, coalition building, and grassroots engagement, Jesse ensures that environmental justice is at the forefront of Ohio's energy decisions. His work aligns with the OEC's mission to secure healthy air, clean water, and vibrant public lands for all Ohioans, holding decision makers accountable and advocating for strong environmental protections. We are very grateful to have him here tonight, and with that, let's welcome Jesse.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Genevieve. Thank you, Tim, for the invitation. Thank you for being here, for joining and inviting me to your community to speak. My name is Jesse Velazquez, and I'm the Climate Justice Manager with the Ohio Environmental Council, and just feel very honored to be able to be a part of this Embracing God's Creation series, and very importantly, to see that the conversation around environmental justice is part of that same dialogue, because there's a beautiful prayer, and from those words, what I hope my understanding of environmental justice, you'll also see resonates very strongly. So that's the subject of today's presentation. I practiced it. Takes about 40 minutes, depending on how nervous I get and how fast I talk. But that's the goal. Is we're going to try to understand, see what is environmental justice, how it's evolved, and how we see it. A little bit at the federal level, but at the state in Ohio, and definitely here in Cincinnati. And as someone who works in the field, I'm excited to share my perspective, a little bit about my story, my organization, my role, also how I came into this work, and really help hopefully answer any questions you have and serve as a signpost to to learn a further understanding of environmental justice and our role in it. And before I start, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
All right, at any point to say, go back, please repeat. I didn't figure out how to use the slide deck. But I do want to start by giving just a little context about the perspective you'll be hearing tonight, where it's coming from, starting with my organization, the Ohio Environmental Council. Speaker notes. And actually want to start back with our mission statement to give some of that context. So the OEC mission, and Ohio Environmental Council, sometimes you'll hear me refer to it as OEC. I'll do my best to kind of spell out any acronyms. I know that was very difficult for me coming to this work, and it's not just environmentalism, I know, but I've been at the OEC about 1 year now, and can probably say a full sentence using only acronyms. So I've officially arrived at this point, but I'll do my best to spell it out. But so the OEC mission, to protect the environment and health of all Ohio communities through legal and policy advocacy, decision-maker accountability, and civic engagement. And our vision is a clean, healthy Ohio where our democracy empowers all communities to thrive in harmony with the environment. And so this slide is from our strategic plan, linked on our website. I wanted to share it because it kind of gives some of our organizational structure. 6 different focus areas that we work in: climate, energy, public lands, water, democracy, and field advocacy. And as Genevieve mentioned, my role is specifically under our energy team, where our goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and increase Ohioans' access and ownership of reliable, affordable, and clean energy. And then my role as climate justice manager also allows me then to support all of our other focus areas to ensure that equity and justice are really centered in the way that we engage. A few unique qualities about OEC I want to share too are that we also have legal experts supporting each of these teams. And what that does, that allows us to intervene in some of these cases. So for example, in public lands, we can intervene in cases where our public lands are being threatened by leasing out to fracking interests. Or in energy, we can intervene at the Power Sightings Board to support communities looking to add solar energy in their communities. So that's a unique aspect. We are a C3, a nonprofit organization, but we have a C4 arm, and that's called the Ohio Environmental Council Action Fund. And what that does, it allows us to also then lobby at the State House for policies. So it has some unique structure to the organization. And I do want to call out that the organization really used to be just those top 4 focus areas: climate, water, energy, public lands, and we expanded to include democracy and field advocacy. And democracy we'll definitely get more into as we look at environmental justice policy. But we realized that in order to accomplish that vision of a healthy and equitable Ohio, we needed equitable democracy policies that increased civic participation, expand voter access, and empower Ohioans to combat environmental injustice at the ballot box. And then we also realized that although there's a lot of important work being done at the State House, there's a lot of important work outside of the State House. And to be impactful in that mission, our field team advocates for local policies, builds meaningful relationships with local leaders and community partners as needed. So we have a Southwest Ohio, a Southeast field advocacy director, Northeast, where we're located in Columbus Central, and looking to expand into Northwest Ohio as well. So later in the presentation, we'll look at some of what that field advocacy looks like, and then especially in partnership with some of those great organizations here in Cincinnati on the front lines of environmental justice work. So hopefully that gives us a little context again of where this presentation is coming from. And I want to start by asking the question, maybe answering it: what is environmental justice? I'll also refer to it in some slides as EJ as well. But really to start, environmental justice is about equity, ensuring that all people, regardless of who they are, where they live, are treated fairly when it comes to environmental policies and decisions. And so the EPA website and the environmental justice page no longer exists on the EPA website, but you can still actually find the technical definition under the environmental issues and terms acronyms that's still archived there. So what they define environmental justice is the fair treatment of people of all races, cultures, incomes, and educational levels with respect to the development and enforcement of environmental laws, regulations, and policies. And they're going to then define, well, what's fair treatment? Fair treatment implies that no population should be forced to shoulder a disproportionate share of exposure to the negative effects of pollution due to lack of political or economic strength. And many organizations, my own included, really struggle to and went through intensive processes to how do we define things like environmental justice. And it usually then led to subcategories. Okay, well, how do we define equity? How do we define fairness? How do we find what's just? And how do we define the environment? A lot of times environmentalism, you can get construed as saying you're advocating for something out there, right? The environment's out there, and that's very important when you look at environmental justice. That forces a reframing to talk about what's here, right here as well, and how our society is constructed. And so, for example, it's not just looking at greenhouse gas emissions. When you look at it through an environmental justice lens, you also have to ask, well, how are those greenhouse gas emissions impacting this community? Why are they impacting this community different? And when you start to ask that question, obviously that requires a little deeper reflection. So I have here Dr. Robert Bullard, often coined as the father of environmental justice for decades of work in this field, really emphasizes that what environmental justice means is that no community is left behind, or no community is harmed by pollution, by industry, climate change. Everyone has the right to clean air, safe water, and a healthy place to live. At the end of the slide, too, I'll have some links included to Dr. Bullard's website and some of the other resources I'll share tonight. But environmental justice is about systems, laws, regulations, policies, but it's also about human dignity, health, and participation. So we're going to unpack that a little bit further. And I'll start by looking at some of the roots of the movement. And environmental justice has its deep roots in the civil rights movement. Some of the key flashpoints was in 1982 in Warren County, North Carolina. There was a small, mostly black community that was chosen as a site for a toxic PCB landfill. Community members organized and protested by lining the road to block the trucks. They lost that battle, but it sparked it ignited a national conversation. And in 1991, the first National People of Color Environmental Leadership Summit defined environmental justice as a movement, not just an issue, centered around self-determination, systemic racism, and health equity. In 1994, President Clinton at the time signed an executive order which directed federal agencies to consider environmental justice in their decision-making. And so really to reference Dr. Bullard again, he reminds us that environmental justice is really about finishing the work that the civil rights movement started. The fight for clean air, clean water, a healthy environment is a fight for civil rights. So then in January 2021, President Biden signed an executive order titled Tackling the Climate Crisis at Home and Abroad. And this order underscored a commitment to environmental justice. It established the Justice 40 initiative, which basically ensures that 40% of all federal climate and clean energy investment benefits go to disadvantaged communities. It also formed the White House Environmental Justice Advocacy Council, who would then coordinate these efforts around different government agencies. Then building on this momentum, in August of 2022, we had the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA, and to provide significant funding to address environmental disparities. The legislation directed substantial resources towards clean energy initiatives, pollution reduction, climate resilience projects, and focused on supporting underserved communities. And then further advancing these goals, the Environmental Protection Act, the US EPA, launched the Community Change Grants Program in December of 24, announcing nearly $1.6 billion in grants. And these funds, again, designated for local projects, reducing pollution, enhancing climate resilience, and building capacity in communities facing environmental justice challenges. And these initiatives really reflect a comprehensive federal approach to integrating environmental justice in policy and funding decisions, aiming to rectify historical inequalities, which we'll definitely talk about more, and promote sustainable, equitable communities. But as we'll also talk about, many of these federal policies under the Biden administration are now being challenged and rolled back under the Trump administration. So environmental justice covers a wide range of issues, but there's some major themes that we see again and again. And first, overall, health impacts. That communities that live near pollution, factories, highways, incinerators, they often face higher rates of asthma, cancer, and other chronic illnesses. And this is not random. These are patterns that connect proximity to pollution. And today, the most potent predictor of an individual's health and well-being is still their zip code. In the United States, Black, Brown, Indigenous, and low-income communities are much more likely to live near sources of pollution. And policy and power are big drivers. Environmental decisions are made at zoning boards, state houses, federal agencies, and many of the people most affected are not at those tables. So that's where community organizing comes in. So much of environmental justice work is led by local residents who are standing up for their communities and demanding change. And then finally acknowledging that climate change is multiplying these risks. Floods, heat waves, power outages already hit vulnerable communities, and they hit them the hardest. But these same communities are full of resilience and solutions, and that's an important caveat to environmental justice work. It's recognizing that communities closest to the problems also mean that they're closest to the solutions. And organizations that advocate for environmental justice really need to be conscious of that, conscious of their impact when they engage in communities, to ensure that it's the community's voice that is leading the process, and the organization is there to empower and to amplify that voice and not risk replacing it with its own, however well-intentioned that may be. So environmental justice brings together all these threads and insists that social justice must be at the center of a conversation around environmentalism and climate. And that conversation must include the voice of the community being impacted. And so I'd like to look at a case study, a bigger picture of a tragically ongoing case study, what's broadly called as Cancer Alley in Louisiana. It's an 85-mile stretch between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, and it's home to over 150 petrochemical plants and refineries concentrated along the Mississippi River. And it's called Cancer Alley because of some of the highest rates of cancer in the country. And residents also suffer from elevated levels of asthma, respiratory illness, cardiovascular, and other chronic diseases. And these communities are are majority Black. Many residents can trace their roots back generations, even to the time of slavery. These are communities with deep ties to the land, but have been surrounded by industry and systematically denied environmental protections. One major source of pollution there was the Denka Performance Elastomer plant. It is the Denka plant, which emits chloroquine, a likely human carcinogen, where the EPA itself has said that the cancer risk there is 50 times greater than the national average. So in 2023, the Biden administration's EPA filed a lawsuit against Denka, forcing it to reduce its emissions and protect nearby residents. And that was a significant move. It was one of the strongest federal environmental justice enforcement acts in years. Recently, unfortunately, earlier this month, as a matter of fact, that lawsuit was dropped by the Trump administration as part of a broader rollback of what's being termed ideological overreach in federal agencies. So this kind of just shows, how deeply policy decisions matter in environmental justice. The health and safety of entire communities can hinge on who's in power and how seriously they take their obligation to protect vulnerable populations. But still, the residents of Cancer Alley continue to fight back, organizing protests, filed lawsuits, testified before Congress, demanding action, and showing immense courage and resilience. Cancer Alley reminds us that environmental injustice is not accidental. It's the result of policy, power, and systemic inequity. And it is in no way unique to Louisiana. We see environmental justice tragedies make the headlines where marginal communities face disproportional harm, such as the Flint water crisis in Michigan, Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Standing Rock and the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota, and even the East Palestine train derailment here in Ohio in 2023. But the reality is that most stories do not make the news, as environmental justice deals with historic and systemic inequities that are often overlooked as societal norms, and those impacted do not often have the effective means to advocate on the behalf. So again, those stories continue to go untold. But as we see, in Canada, policy plays a massive role in environmental justice, and it can really be either a tool for harm, but also a tool for healing. So on one side, we'll see harmful policies like permitting polluting industries and already overburdened communities, weak or inconsistent zoning laws that allow factories near schools and homes, and a long history of under-enforcement, where regulations exist on paper, but they aren't applied fairly or strongly. And then on the other side, we're starting to see what transformative policies can look like that center justice. That Justice 40 initiative, again, created under the Biden administration, committing 40% of federal climate and clean energy investments to disadvantaged communities. The EPA's methane rule, which was finalized in 2023, was a major step to holding oil and gas companies accountable for emissions that disproportionately impact frontline communities. And then here in Ohio, a few General Assemblies ago, we had legislation like House Bill 429, the Energy Jobs and Justice Act, which tried to embed equity into how we build a clean energy future here in Ohio. Unfortunately, House Bill 429 did not move forward in Ohio. And again, as we've discussed, many of these federal policies, such as Justice 40 initiative and the methane rule, are being challenged and rolled back under the new administration. Ohio Environmental Council, we're continuing to advocate for policies such as continuing to advocate for policies that were in House Bill 429, just under new legislation now, under new names, and looking to work with agencies like the Ohio EPA to move forward with implementing a strong state plan to curb methane emissions. So the work continues even in the midst of challenges that we see, but it highlights again that policies don't happen by accident, and policy isn't neutral. It reflects power. So part of environmental justice work is ensuring that people most affected are shaping the rules, not just living under them. I want to take a closer look and tell you a little bit more about what the OEC is working on in environmental justice in communities across Ohio. In Youngstown, we help support residents fighting against Sobe Thermal, a proposed waste-to-energy plant that has been sited near homes, schools, and churches, and we help secure a temporary moratorium to give the community more time and space to push back, raise health and safety concerns, and we'll continue to support that community through the moratorium process. Our democracy team plays a big role in environmental justice. And in fact, I know a few of you here were involved in this as well. OEC, along with many great organizations across the state, tried to help to got redistricting reform on the ballot in this last election to help make sure Ohioans, especially those in underserved and overburdened communities, have fair representation in state policy decisions. And then after it was on the ballot, continued to work to try and get the ballot passed by voters against a substantial misinformation campaign by opposition, which unfortunately we did not get the redistricting initiative passed this last election. But we will continue to do that work for redistricting reform as well as voter reform, such as the Voter Bill of Rights. In neighborhoods across Ohio, supporting community solar and utility scale solar projects that are driven by local leaders, creating access to affordable clean energy, lowering energy burdens. And these projects can be very divisive in communities across Ohio. Again, seeing massive misinformation campaigns, sometimes leading to having counties completely ban solar projects in their areas. So really there our work centers around making sure that the developers and the commissioners are transparent and concerned residents have access to factual information and the ability for meaningful input in these decisions regarding their communities. In Southeast Ohio, we're partnering with residents advocating for the retirement of polluting coal plants and making sure those transitions are just with investments in workforce development and health protections. So environmentalism might seek to close a coal plant, But when you look at it from a frame of environmental justice, that reframes it to how do we transition from a polluting coal plant to a non-health harming energy source, clean energy, all different definitions, but that would still provide the community with jobs, with tax revenue and economic development benefits. So there's some caveats when you talk about environmentalism and environmental justice. And also in Southeast Ohio, supporting organizations that are looking to cap the multitude of orphan wells, abandoned oil and gas wells that leak methane, a potent greenhouse gas, into the nearby communities and ecosystems. And so these are examples really of why equity and community power are essential in any environmental solution. And then I want to give another example of how environmental justice shows up in my work in energy policy advocacy. So right now, our Action Fund, OEC Action Fund, is also working at the State House to help shape legislation, again, that advances environmental justice, not just environmental policy. And our energy team is actively advocating on currently 2 bills, House Bill 15 and Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 2 has already unanimously passed the Senate, and as of 3 o'clock this afternoon, the House Bill 15 has passed the House. So now they will merge into one final bill that both chambers will work on before it goes to Governor DeWine's desk. But these are bills focused on Ohio's energy systems. And so a way that we advocate, for example, is we're pushing to include things like a community energy provision. This would allow solar generation for renters, low-income households, and those without rooftop access to benefit from affordable clean energy. We're advocating for the inclusion of heat maps and reliability metrics to be made publicly made available by utilities. And those tools would help identify communities that experience frequent blackouts, outdated infrastructure, high energy burdens, and that way we can target investments to improve their access to a reliable grid. We also call for extensions the public input periods in energy facilitating siting processes. So that way when an energy facility is cited to go into one of these areas, these communities have appropriate time, especially the ones that have been historically excluded, have an appropriate time to meaningfully weigh in on that process. And so these 2 bills, and so we're very excited that both are through now, and the work now continues to get the final bill to have these provisions that are currently in one form or another in these bills. But an example of how environmental justice shows up in the legislative process. It's not just about fighting the bad proposals, but also shaping the good or the neutral ones to be more inclusive, more equitable, and more effective. And pivoting more locally, I want to look at some of the biggest environmental justice challenges we face here in Cincinnati. By no means a full list or even in a priority order, but still some of the more pressing challenges, starting with urban heat. Our city has some of the worst urban heat island disparities in the Midwest. And historically, redline neighborhoods where Black and immigrant communities were denied loans and investments now have far less tree cover. In some majority Black neighborhoods, tree canopy can be less than 10%, while in majority white neighborhoods, it's over 30%. And that can mean a 10-degree difference in air temperature on a hot summer day. Extreme heat, matter of fact, is now the #1 weather-related cause of death in the United States. And it's especially for seniors and people with chronic illnesses. And as climate change brings more frequent heat waves, these disparities will only worsen. Second, flooding. Climate change is causing heavier rainfall, more intense storms. Cincinnati, much like many of our municipalities, are not built to handle that. Our combined sewer systems often overflow into basements, streets, especially in low-income areas with aging pipelines and poor drainage. Neighborhoods like East Price Hill have had hundreds of basement backup complaints in the recent years, and these backups can carry sewage, which creates serious health hazards as well. Energy burden. Energy burden is the percentage a household spends on utilities. Nationally, the average for low income, when you say energy poor energy burden, is about 6%. In Cincinnati, some neighborhoods like South Fairmont or Bond Hill, that can be over 10%, which means paying hundreds of dollars a month just to keep the lights on or the air conditioner on. And compile that with old housing with poor insulation, frequent power outages, and the inability to invest in things like energy efficiency. The result is more money spent greater health risks, and more vulnerability during heat waves and winter storms. So these are interconnected challenges, and again, they hit hardest in communities that have already been historically disinvested in. Three more to mention, and we'll talk a little bit about these, but important to call out that, again, proximity to pollution. Many low-income neighborhoods are located near industrial corridors, highways, or brownfields. Brownfields are land previously used by industrial and commercial purposes that may have been contaminated, making it a challenge to repurpose for housing, parks, or businesses without requiring cleanup. And these areas see, again, rates of higher asthma, cardiovascular disease. In fact, Cincinnati has more than 50 brownfield sites, many of them in communities of color, and residents often don't have a say whether new polluting facilities move in. Transportation and green space access. Lack of reliable public transit means that many people have trouble getting to jobs, medical care, grocery stores. In some neighborhoods, the nearest full service grocery can be over a mile away with no direct bus route. And even with bus routes, if there's inclement weather, things like that, that can impact reliability on these systems. Access to green space can vary widely across the city. Parks and trees, aren't just beautification projects. They've been shown to reduce stress, improve air quality, and as we saw, keep temperatures down. And then we've said this one, but this is very important to highlight again. In fact, looking at history, environmental justice, it's important probably to even go back to pre-colonial times. But historic redlining and disinvestment, if you overlay 1930 redlining maps with maps of today's climate risk, energy burden, health disparities in Cincinnati, they line up. Then that's not an accident. These communities were systematically denied investment for generations. So today they still have lower property values, higher energy costs, and less political power, often being excluded from meaningful engagements in zoning, permitting, and infrastructure planning. So environmental justice is really about changing that. It's about recognizing and correcting these legacies and building a future for communities that can thrive, not just survive. And so talking about how federal and state level policies have profound impacts on environmental justice, and in facing a lot of those local challenges we just listed, I think it's probably even more important to say in many regards that environmental justice has to be rooted in the community. It's about ensuring that these communities have access to decision making in its many forms and are empowered to advocate on their behalf. So I'd like to look at how environmental justice work shows up here in Cincinnati, some of those organizations on the front line. And first up, I wanted to highlight the work of Green Umbrella's Regional Climate Collaborative. And what Green Umbrella is it brings together local governments, nonprofits, and institutions to coordinate equity-centered climate action. The collaborative provides resources, toolkits, and technical assistance to help municipalities incorporate environmental justice principles into their climate strategies. So for example, they might help cities identify overburdened neighborhoods, apply for federal grants, and build capacity for inclusive planning processes. And really what makes Green Umbrella so impactful that it's not just about one city or one project, it's about creating a regional culture of climate equity with shared tools and shared goals. And there are many entry points for people to become engaged in Green Umbrella's work, and all of these have environmental justice implications. So I just wanted to highlight a couple of these programs. The Greater Cincinnati Regional Food Policy Council, which advocates for a socially, economically, and environmentally resilient regional food system. The Green Space Alliance, we talked about green space, which focuses on protecting and restoring our regional green spaces for the benefit of all. The Greater Cincinnati 2030 District, which builds a network of high-performing buildings to reduce energy, water, and transportation-related emissions. The Green Schoolyards Action Network, which supports schools in expanding nature-based learning, exploration, and environmental education. The Common Orchard Project, growing public orchards to increase food access, activated green space, and neighborhood connection. And Faith Communities Go Green, which educates, engages, and empowers people of faith to create a more sustainable and equitable future. And all of these programs hold meetings, they have events, and I wanted to plug one event, the big one for Green Umbrella, which is their Midwest Regional Sustainability Summit. This year takes place June 5th, I believe, at the Sharonville Convention Center. And if you have the ability to go to it, just really recommended to see how all the great work, especially as it pertains to environmental justice, is being done in Cincinnati. And then Green Umbrella co-runs another program, this one with Groundwork Ohio River Valley, called the Climate Safe Neighborhoods Partnership. And Groundwork Ohio River Valley is really one of the more powerful examples of what community-rooted environmental justice looks like in Cincinnati. And Climate Safe Neighborhoods is part of a national network initiated by Groundwork USA, but the idea is simple yet transformative. Overlay those historic redlining maps, which show Black and immigrant communities who were systematically denied resources with modern climatability data like heat exposure, flood risk, tree canopy loss, and what they found confirms what many of the residents already knew, that the neighborhoods that were most excluded in the past are the most exposed today. But the project is not just research, it's about action. So Climate Safe Neighborhoods brings together youth, residents, local governments to co-design neighborhood-scale strategies like planting trees, creating cooling centers, advocating for better infrastructure, and preparing for climate risks. You can see a couple of their maps here, one in Norwood and Lower Price Hill, and they have many others on their website. But Groundwork's Green Team plays a central role, and these are high school youth, many from impacted neighborhoods, that are trained in climate science, mapping, data collection, and advocacy. And so they not only learn, but now they lead. Green Umbrella then helps bring together the local governments and agencies to support this work at a systems level, connecting community solutions to regional planning. And so this is a powerful model of what environmental justice looks like: local, intergenerational, data-informed, and community-led. And I really want to highlight and emphasize that youth-led advocacy as a really important group to empower in environmental justice work, as again, they are inheriting the consequences, good and bad, of the decisions and actions we make today. So ensuring that their voice is represented in decision-making is very important. And then lastly, I'd like to acknowledge the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environment and Sustainability, the OES, who's also putting environmental justice front and center, especially through the latest update of the Green Cincinnati Plan, this last one in 2023. It's a citywide action plan co-created with over 3,000 residents, with a strong emphasis on equity and community leadership. And every section of the plan, whether it's about energy, food, waste, mobility, it includes equity-driven actions and justice metrics. And so in my opinion, this is a very important attribute of environmental justice work, that it brings together a lot of different disciplines and focus areas to truly address challenges from all sides. And the Green Cincinnati Plan does a great job at this. The Office of Environment and Sustainability also supported community-led workshops, again, ensuring that those residents who are most impacted by environmental injustices are at that center of decision-making. So it's really a model for how cities can move beyond planning and into equitable implementation, where every neighborhood gets a chance to thrive, even in a changing climate. And I wanted to include their definition of equity here. Equity is just and fair inclusion in which all can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. In sustainability work, equity must be recognitional, procedural, distributional, restorational, and transformational. And when I read it, I said that's a lot of nulls, but I think it really emphasizes how layered these challenges can be, right? And so how the challenges are complex, interconnected, so the solutions must also really contain a holistic scope. And because of that holistic scope, there are many entry points into environmental justice work. So I briefly wanted to share mine. And for me, it started with the idea of sustainability. I grew up here in Cincinnati. After high school, I really thought I'd trade in these Cincinnati Springs. I can't decide if we need to go back to winter or skip the summer. Just left for Florida instead, where I worked in retail management in fast fashion. And environmentalism was an important idea to me, but I really didn't have any words or actions for it outside of, recycle if it's available, and if you can figure out which number you can do at the time. But interesting enough, it was actually a 2016, that I decided a personal sea change had to take place, in the conclusion of in the midst of the political and social volatility, that the concept of sustainability was something important for me to understand. And that definition is it's the meaning that meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs is essential for a successful society, really a successful species. So this led me to pursue a degree in environmental sustainability in Florida, and eventually leave my career in retail, move back home here to Cincinnati and pursue this work. But some of the greatest things that resonated with me, we've talked about, but you cannot have a sustainable society if those that contribute the least to the drivers of climate change are the ones most impacted by it. And going to college in Florida, sustainability has some different discussions than we have in Ohio, such as ocean level rise, sunny day, flooding, agricultural runoff impacting the Everglades, aquifers, fisheries and algae blooms, and of course hurricane intensity and how often those occur. But just as we already mentioned, learned Cincinnati has those real climate impacts as well. The increased heat, especially in those urban islands, heavier rainfall, flooding, longer, more intense allergy seasons, and most importantly, became aware that those socioeconomic factors exacerbated all of these climate impacts, such as energy burden. That raising energy bills due to the more extreme heat waves in the summer and winter storms have a tremendous impact on low-income households who are already struggling with housing costs. So my first job in environmental advocacy was actually as an intern with Green Umbrella, we mentioned, and then eventually finding my way to the Ohio Environmental Council. But really, I wanted to highlight my journey, really just at the beginning, that it starts with a worldview. How do you frame equity into that worldview? And so, as we see, environmental justice requires action at multiple levels, right? Federal, state, local, and that we each have to find where we have those avenues to impact at those levels. So locally, involvement can range from attending city council meetings, participating in community sustainability projects, showing up to somebody speaking about what environmental justice is. Those organizations I mentioned, Green Umbrella, Groundwork Ohio River Valley, the City of Cincinnati's Office of Environmental Sustainability, those are local leaders in this work and have many ways to get involved. And there are many other great local organizations here doing work that impacts environmental justice. So I recommend just starting with an issue that most resonates with you. Maybe it's a food rescue, trying to alleviate some of the food deserts we have here. At the state level, advocating for legislation that promotes environmental justice is crucial. So organizations like the Ohio Environmental Council, we can help guide those efforts, but oftentimes we collaborate in coalitions with other state-based organizations. That way we can foster more leverage and collective power at the state level. So again, there are many great state organizations doing this work, and there are many national environmental justice networks, campaigns, opportunities for us to engage with our elected officials, as if they show up to the town halls and submit public comments to federal agencies. And right now that can feel very overwhelming at the federal level, but hopefully we can see that we can still focus our impacts at that state and city level. But because environmental justice is really about having a society with an equity-centered paradigm, and we all are part of society by definition, there is no action too small. Our actions, whether conscious or unconscious, impact how environmental justice is woven throughout the fabric of our society. And so before we take a break for the reflection and wrap up with any Q&A, I stated that the challenges of environmental justice are local, statewide, national, global for sure, and that there is so much connective tissue, shared goals for us as human beings to frame our engagement with each other, our engagement with our environment around an equity-centered worldview. And I wanted to end on a reflection I had regarding Pope Francis' Laudato Si on care for our common home, which inspires and guides Catholics and faith-based institutions in responding to the ecological and social challenges of our times. And when I looked at the goals, and I'll share those. They are shared with the mission statements, the vision statements, the values of those organizations, including my own that I mentioned. I see these same goals reflected in the language of the Green Cincinnati Plan locally, as well as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals globally. So I want to briefly list them here. That response to the cry of the earth, actions to protect nature and combat climate change. Response to the cry of the poor, defending human life and dignity, especially the most vulnerable. Ecological economics, ethical fair trade and divestment from fossil fuels. Adoption of simple lifestyles, reducing waste, energy use, and unnecessary consumption. Ecological education, rethinking curricula and fostering ecological awareness and responsibility. Ecological spirituality, deepening the spiritual connection to creation through prayer and reflection. And then community engagement and participatory action, building networks and partnerships for collective action. So in closing, the call for environmental justice isn't just found in policy papers or in courtrooms. It echoes through our community organizing, through our faith traditions, and every person and organization working to repair the relationship between us as people, with each other, and with our planet. So whether it's reducing energy burden, planting trees, empowering youth, cleaning up toxic sites, or showing up for your neighbors, this work connects us locally and globally. We have a role, and no act of care is too small when it's rooted in justice, compassion, and love for creation. Only together can we build a future where all communities aren't just protected, but they're truly empowered to thrive. And so with that, my name again, Jesse Velazquez. I've got some of my cards too as well. If you're interested in my contact information, would love to chat with you further. Just want to say thank you for coming, and then have a link to our advocacy toolkit if you're interested in becoming more involved in what we do at OEC, as well as some of the other resources that I mentioned. So I'll see if we can send the slide deck out with to you all as well. But, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I appreciate it.